What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Coachable Podcast. I'm your host, Tori Gordon. And today is a special day. We have got none other than Sean Clayton in the house from Austin, Texas. Very excited to have him. He's a life and business strategist, a visionary spiritual coach, and someone I've been following for quite a while whose content really came on my page and I was like, who is this guy? I need to know him and I need to understand how he accumulated so much wisdom. He infuses his incredible business acumen with deep understanding of ancient wisdom. And it just infuses it into a modality that allows us to create insane abundance in our lives. So get ready, buckle your seatbelts. You're going to have I promise you're going to want to take notes because this guy is a wealth of knowledge. And I'm excited to have a conversation that really centers around how you can change your physical reality, create more abundance in your life by understanding your spiritual nature and how that is a part of a bigger masterpiece of how we're all connected to the one. So welcome to the show. And welcome to the show.
No, thank you for having me. It's awesome to be here. I appreciate the invite, and it's a wonderful space. So
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for this.
I'd love for you to just start with giving me a little bit of background on you personally and kind of what it is that you do exactly. If you could give us a high level overview. Yeah.
So where do we start? Background wise, born in Dallas, Texas. Okay. Grew up in, I would consider, a beautiful yet traumatic household. I didn't realize it was beautiful at the time. Had stems of trauma growing up from sexual abuse between 9 and 14. Ended up, after that, you kind of like break the construct of like who you are because you're like, I don't get me at this point because there's so much going on. Then you start looking for the validation of the outside world. And so I would say the next after from 14 to about 39 years old, I'm looking for the world to affirm me. And I'd say a little bit after that, but it was actually when I met my now wife is when all of that started to open up and started to shift for me in understanding there was something outside of what I'd been told, but I've been taught, and how to break the illusion of all of the systems that came about. In my 20s, took my life a bunch of times, ended up federally incarcerated. So there was a lot of that came along. Now, that's not necessarily background. That's just more of like what I call the beautiful trauma that created the life that I have now, which I can appreciate. All of that led to me, getting into, oddly, like when I was in prison, when I got out, I started selling cars. That got me into digital marketing because I'm like, let me figure out how to sell cars faster.
Sure.
That led into me starting an agency, that has really started to bloom and grow from a marketing standpoint. Then I started to understand, this is how you should talk to people. There's a cultural intersection and relevancy that we're supposed to have that allows people to then snap into the frequency of what you mean and what you're saying. I was so blessed when I was at one of the large agencies, this WPP, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, that I started their neuro lab or helped them work in the neuro lab. And then through that whole understand how brain waves would react to like stimulus and to advertising and to colors and to things along those lines. Well, then after that, I ended up going to this thing called neurofeedback, which is brain training.
Okay.
And that allowed me to understand, there's the same brain waves that helps me understand the stimulus of life that I do for business that also helps me tap into my spirituality and kind of like the meditative state and that like stillness that you get within. So a little bit of that work helped me unlock, got into Joe Dispenza land. That helped me unlock.
Yeah.
I ended up going down like all of the ancient teachings and that unlocked, and then got into Gnosticism, got into Hermetics, got into Rosicrucianism, so I'm like the Kabbalah, you name it. So,
I've seen it splattered all over.
Yeah. And then you say, okay, well, what's the truth? Yeah. And because everybody has a version of it.
Yes.
And what I started to recognize is that there's this beautiful like mosaic that's been built, this big picture that we can't get. We focus on like a little piece of the puzzle, but that puzzle snaps into another puzzle, into another puzzle, into another puzzle. And what we end up doing is we say, okay, well, these pieces don't fit. So I'm going to go build my own little puzzle over here and create my own little story. And that story is separate from all the other stories when they're not. You go to the Tower of Babel, right? And everything's separated. Everybody went to their own silos and spoke their own language and did their own thing, created their own religion. There's no problem with that because it's cool because we had to do it to understand how deep we could go. And now we're at the point to where it's about coming back together and seeing and honoring everybody's modalities. everybody's gifts, everybody's separation to provide the compassion and acceptance, which this is now we're in this whole feminine age of being able to receive everybody as they are. And at which point you no longer judge them. And at which point everything snaps into the big picture. And this is about, the overview effect they talk about. You start to zoom out and you start to see everything, not from yourself. You start to see it from like a very, very like large perspective or the all perspective. And that's where the story starts to shift. And that's where we are now in this process of ascension if we choose to accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
I was in meditation earlier this morning and I had that moment where I snapped into the perception of like the overview effect, where I was seeing myself from above, not from within the experience. And just as you said that, I was like, I've had moments where I snap out of my separateness, my separate little world, where I've taken the puzzle pieces in my life and made a story out of them to make it make sense. Because what we're all trying to do is make life make sense to us. It's like, why are we here? What are we doing? What is the point of all of this? And we all have our own ways of trying to find that truth. I'm curious for you, how do you define truth?
Well, it's a great question. There is the only truth is the truth inside of you. The illusion outside of you, the senses that we see is not truth. Because if I take, let's say for instance, you're sitting there, I have a very specific perspective of you. If somebody was sitting over on the other side, they have a different perspective of you. Right?
Both truths exist.
Both truths, but not the truth. The truth is what's inside of you as you observe what's outside of you. So there are infinite versions of truth. So when we say, okay, I need to lock in on the version of truth, a version of truth, well, what is the version of truth? It's a version of, right? And so you start to move yourself into saying, well, everybody's perspective is very true. And when they attempt to make their perspective your perspective in a space of manipulation out of fear or anxiety or shame or grief or guilt or anything that's like what we would call the slower vibrations of the Hawking scale, that's when it becomes a lie. Because there's a process of manipulation of self-indulgence that isn't in consideration of the truth that other person walks in. Does that make sense?
So are you essentially saying when I try to project my truth onto someone else and make it their truth,
yes,
then I'm essentially in a lie?
You're essentially in a lie when you force it or you have an expectation or try to control. When you're just there to influence and let it be, and you detach and you accept whatever the outcome is, then you're in truth, right?
Yeah.
So you take like God, for instance. God controls nothing.
Okay.
Influences everything. Okay? Puts the energy out on everything. So then it's like, okay, if I am made in the image of, then what is my responsibility? My responsibility is to zoom out, slow down, and then detach and look at it and say, okay, well, I put my influence out. How is it being accepted? If it's rejected,
and just watch and observe.
If it's rejected, then you got work to do, right? That's part of the initiation. So Rudolf Steiner talks about the ways of initiation.
Okay.
Whenever you get resistance, that's like a road bump. Oh, okay, maybe I need to slow down when I go over the bump so that I don't tear my car up.
Right.
Right? And that's just feedback for us. So when you get that feedback and you're like, oh, well, I'm saying something. This was like when I started doing the social stuff. Like my first 5 videos, 10, 20 videos were bombs. Like it's like, whoa, nobody's getting this stuff.
Sure.
But I knew there was something. So it's like, okay, then you refine it and then it starts to expand and then people accept it. And they're like, oh, okay, well, then you start to walking in the truth of not only yourself, but that of who accepts you on the other side.
Interesting. Do you know anything about spiral dynamics?
I don't know.
I was curious because especially being in marketing, I have limited understanding of it, so we won't get into it much. But my understanding is that basically it's these levels of consciousness, and based on the levels of consciousness, you use different language to speak to that individual.
Yeah.
So based on if you're speaking to a certain demographic, you use different language to speak to them at their level of consciousness so they absorb it and understand.
Yeah. Walter Russell has a thing called the cosmic clock.
Okay.
Okay. Do you know who Walter Russell is? So Walter Russell, Terrence Howard is. Okay. So Terrence Howard blew up the internet recently with this whole thing. Terrence Howard helped revive a lot of Walter Russell's work. And Walter Russell was, he wrote a book called The Universal One and I'm going to talk about it's a spiral dynamics, because I feel like it has to do with this as a conscious version of it. Wrote a book called The Universal One in 1926.
Okay.
And he gave that book to Nikola Tesla, and Tesla said, lock this book up for 2,000 years because humanity isn't ready to read it, right? He gave it to Einstein, and Einstein said, I wish I would have spent more time with Walter Russell's work, right? He was an artist. He had no business really like talking about these things, but he would have these downloads every 8 years since he was 8. And every 8 years, he would just like open up more, and all of these crazy things came like out of him, even to the point to where he created this cosmic clock, which showed the inhale and the exhale of the universe. And when he pulled the cosmic clock out, it had different octaves to it, and those octaves create colors and sounds. And there's a periodicity of those octaves. I'm trying to use normal language here that end up scaling out the periodic table of how things show up in life. And there's positive and negative on each side, or masculine and feminine versions in each octave. And then when those masculine and feminine come together in balance, they create a crystal structure that's an unbreakable bond. Which is why, like, inside of a structure, if you put sodium and chloride together, they snap together with a vigorous force because of the energy between them. But then you have salt, which is a structure that's an unbreakable bond, right? It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But inside of that cosmic clock, it starts at a very low octave, and it gets wider and wider and wider. And the language of the octaves that are spoken at each one of those different parts of the spiral have a specific frequency that once you snap into those, you end up getting a different kind of magnetism to them.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's similar.
Sounds similar.
Yeah.
Because based on your level of consciousness, you're at a different vibration, so you can pick up on different information.
Yeah. Exactly.
Interesting. It's interesting that he was having those every 8 years.
Exactly.
And I'm curious if you have any understanding of the significance of 8. We also just went through the Lionsgate portal. 888.
Yes.
What is your take on?
I have a weird version of it. Maybe it's not weird.
I would be interested to hear what your take on it is.
So I look at life through dimensions.
Okay.
And there's the digital root of everything. You're familiar with the digital root?
Please explain for those that don't know, including myself.
All right. So if you take a number, take the number 33.
Okay.
If you take 33, the digital root is when you put 3 and 3 together. 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay. Right. Every number, you can add all of the actual numbers up, and they go to the digital root, which is somewhere between 0 and 9.
Okay. And that is that the basis of numerology?
That's the basis of numerology, right? So you just take everything, you add it up, you get to the digital root, and then you end up at one of those different numbers.
Right.
Okay. You really don't end up at 0. 0 always is 0, but that is a part of the binary code of existence, which is I call the mother. Okay. Which is the 0 versus the 1, right? And then everything starts to stem out from there. Okay. So 1 through 9 are different dimensions. In the Kabbalah, they talk about those dimensions, and they get a little bit gray when you get past 6.
Okay.
And then I studied a little bit of Matthias de Stefano and some of the things he talks about. And there's a few other kind of versions of that out there, but some of it just came to me. But between 1 through 9, the first 3 dimensions are space, which is why you have 3 dimensions, right? Then you have the 4th dimension, which is time, and you have the past, present, future that live inside of that. Yep. Your 5th dimension is spirit. Okay. So that's what we're called 5-dimensional beings, because we are spiritual beings that are in this space-time experience, which I call coordinates that we live in.
Okay.
Your 6th dimension, which I have the number 6, is God's plan for you. Now, if I was somebody that wanted to keep you away from God's plan, I would tell you that 666 is a really bad thing.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Then you have the 7th dimension, which are the actual laws that create the universe, the 7 hermetic principles, or those 7 laws that actually live like in order to get you to the we state. When you abide those laws and you know how to work in those laws, and you become the cause creator and the balance of those laws, you end up taking the first 6 dimensions, and that becomes the you, and you move into the we state. So you go from I to we. The 8th dimension is the we state, when you see things as yourself and the perspective of every other version in the world that ever could have possibly existed. So then you become, I call it, I had this meditation once where I saw, you've seen X-Men and Cerebro when Professor X goes in there. It's like you see everything from like every perspective. You see yourself, you see everybody else, everything they could possibly see all throughout time. And that is the all. So you're seeing everything, the consideration of everything. So it's an all state, a we state.
Right.
Once you go through that, you end up at the 9th dimension, which is the plan of, it's basically taking the plan of God for you, flip it upside down, you get the 9, is the plan of God for the all. Okay, so the 8 that we just went through is a we state portal that allows us to go through the process of expanding and having a consideration or a shift for everybody else and ourselves. So we see everything from the perspective of the all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you've had that experience of being able to tap into that all consciousness or that perspective on some level.
Somewhat. Yeah. I mean, it's not it's not a me thing. That's the most delicate part of it. It's not like I did it. It was more so you just recognize where you are in the frequency. You recognize that literally everybody that you meet when you're walking down the street is not an accident. That everything that made this chair up, this microphone up, is literally a vibration of our creation. And then at which point you start to embrace the miracle, literally, of everything, because everything has meaning, and everything is full of it, and so everything's meaningful, and so you have no accidents, and so it's not a me thing ever. And that's the thing where the ego gets caught, where we're like, oh, I am doing this really cool thing, then you lose it. So
it's it's a mist. It's like it's gone. The moment that you're like,
you grab it, it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah, so it's a constant attachment and acceptance that moves you into an understanding of the reason of all creation, that keeps you into an understanding of love. Like even one of the things on Hawking's scale, and if you don't know Hawking's scale, is that he has a scale where you go from like shame
to
all the way up to enlightenment. And love sits in that. And we have separated, there's a hierarchy. And I know Hawking's, he'll talk about it where he's like, he didn't really mean it like that, but he just put it on there as a reference frame. But we as people, we see it, we snap into that, and we're like, oh, I really am focused on love, so I got to get to the love state. Love's in everything. Literally in everything. Yeah. So, you imagine that the all, God, source, whatever you want to call spirit, didn't create anything out of hate or shame. We just put a whole story as human beings behind it of what we've been told. We carried that story generationally and genetically.
Yes.
And then we end up snapping it in and saying, well, that's not love. That's love.
Yeah.
That's not.
Exactly. Now we live in a dualistic world where it's like, this is black and white and right and wrong and good and bad versus saying it's all perfect.
Yeah. So it's a constant detachment from the outcome. It's releasing the trauma that we've held. Yeah. The trauma that we have, it just is a gift. And then we use that to go through this process of ascension. And then we wrap our arms around all of creation. Yeah. And we could do it individually. And that's a starting point. And when people see you, they're like, oh, I want to do that. How are you doing that? And then that becomes a thing. Okay, let me be a guide, not the hero. Yeah. And then you help guide other people through that door. And then that's our job in order to be able to have this collective, I feel like, there's this time coming where they call the second coming of the Messiah, but it's not one person. It's all of us doing this together.
I've heard you say that. Yeah. And that's a fascinating concept because for me, I grew up in Alabama. Yes. And Bible Belt, was told, was at a Baptist church most of my life, thought I was going to be in ministry growing up, walked away from that, went on an esoteric, spiritual awakening. When my sister died and I literally saw her, she had to be taken off life support. I saw her transition, which was this awakening moment of, oh my God, I'm so much more than what I thought I was. I'm not this physical body. There is a life force energy that is emanating through me, that is giving me life, that is me. Yeah. And I'm not, my body can be here, but that doesn't mean it's me. So what am I? And that question has been the question I've been, asking ever since then. I love it. And so for so many people who maybe some of these concepts that we're talking about is they're grabbing some of it's a little over their head. But they're like, okay, how do I connect? If we're talking about truth and the true self, how do you define the true self? And where does someone begin to reconnect to that aspect of themselves, their true essence, versus all of the identities and the illusions of who they think they are?
So it requires, you got to start your journey somewhere. Yeah. And we've always already been on it. The problem is we've been judging it. Okay. So one, you got to stop judging the story that you've had and understand that you're perfect right now. Every person listening in this world is perfect. There's a thing that, this is why I always talk about the we state, because you have a past version of yourself and a future version of yourself. Both of those, because they're not present, are the imperfect versions. Okay. The present version is always perfect. This is why the I statements work really well, but if you're always saying I, you're not bringing the past and the future together.
That's so interesting too, because we always think our future version is going to be the version that gets perfect.
No, we're perfect right now.
Right.
So the thing is when you start saying your affirmations and you go into those states and you're looking for the truth, start saying we are, right? Instead of I am, we are. And then you go into that we are state and you're like, oh, now I'm embracing all potential versions of myself because we are quantum beings. And if people don't know what quantum means, it's like everything lives in infinite potential.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we're all living in infinite potential, and I have the ability to do anything, which is the free will choice aspect, that's the quantum thing that we can do, is we have the choice to pick anything. Then at that moment that I have the choice to pick anything, then my thing is, let me actually go within and find what really resonates within me.
Yeah.
And we have these cool balancing systems in our body we call chakras or energy centers. And we can identify when one's out of balance. You'll know when you got a headache.
Yes.
You know when your stomach hurts.
Yep.
You know, like, oh, this doesn't feel right. I went to the bathroom weird. I don't know. Whatever it might be. My throat's scratchy. There's something out of balance. And so the target is to find ways to get that back into balance. And so, you know, okay, if my, you know, sinuses are off. Okay, maybe my third eye's off. Let me figure that out. But also my third eye is also connected to my sacral. So maybe there's something here. Am I living? Do I have some sexual trauma that I've been working through? Is there something that's happening where I'm not tapping into my intuition? And so all of the chakras are literally like these circles that kind of like connect each other, all focusing for us to get into your heart. That's why we say get in your heart. And for anybody who's looking to get to the truth, it's about finding the stillness in your heart. Okay. Being able to sit with that and then removing the imbalances that live in those other energy centers or chakras. And the chakras, you know, remember I was watching, you know, Doctor Strange. It's like, yeah, you get that in a gift shop, right? This is where this stuff shows up. But there is so much in Eastern, you know, religion and Eastern spirituality that is a lot of truth that we've just disbanded because
100%.
we don't get it.
Yeah.
Right. And then we've got the Western religion, which is like, okay, here's this structure and this practice and the ceremony that looks very tangible because I go to church.
Yeah.
But even then we poo-poo on that. And now we've got science that's coming to the door and it's like, oh, well, let's just follow the science thing.
Yes.
But all the science is doing is eliminating the ability to become magical because we put linear thought to something that's not linear. We're not linear beings.
Right.
Right. So then what the hell are we doing?
Yeah. Chasing our tail.
Exactly. It's kind of odd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actionable steps in truth, understand where you're out of balance. Okay. Constantly go within, find that stillness within yourself, then build from there.
Yeah.
And then when you get resistance as you're building, because people will tell you you're crazy. Because when I went on my journey, people were like, you're nuts. My parents were like, what are you talking about? And I just had to keep staying in it. And sometimes I was nuts because I was like veering off in like my own like manipulative world. And becoming a spiritual vampire, which like is a whole thing when you go on your journey. But as you hit those walls and you're like, okay, well, that doesn't feel right and I'm hurting people. Then you go back, get that feedback and you go back within.
Yeah.
And it might be a 10-year process. It might be a 2-week process. There is really no time when it comes to the speed of it, but it's your process. And just know that wherever you are, you're constantly loved. And as you start to become more loved, you'll attract those people that'll be your guides to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hope you guys are taking that in. It's just like, first of all, I think one of the biggest key takeaways is what you said is like, slow down, get still, and go within.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is what most people avoid like the plague because they don't want to meet themselves.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to peer into the mirror that will show them all of the pain that they have been running from. Yet it's like the treasure that you seek is in the cave you fear to enter.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so, you know, if you're coming to the show and if you've been here before and you've listened to these episodes that we talk about this every single week, it's like, if you're looking for a shortcut to bypass your pain, there isn't one.
No,
you know,
no. I mean, if you wanted to say there's a shortcut, the shortcut is you, right? The shortcut isn't outside of you. The shortcut isn't a book to read or a practice to take. You know, people are like, Sean, what's your practice every day now? I'm like, I just live. I don't sit there and find, you know, I used to do like the Joe meditations. I used to do like different practices and I would do this breath work and I would do this. And sometimes like the world might throw you way off and then you have practices to bring you back. But for me at this point, it's just walking in it. When you can be a walking meditation and you can be a walking, like just version of creation and you could stay in that stillness and find the shortcut is through you. You just go right into you.
Yes.
Fastest way to heaven is through you.
Yeah.
That is where that truth lives. And it is, and the issue is we use these senses to say that's whatever it is true. It's about becoming nonsense. People will comment on my say, Sean, that's nonsense. So you're absolutely right, because it is not sense. It's not the sensory. It's the non-sensory. It's finding that stuff that's outside of you, of me saying, you know, I'm going to connect to spirit and everything beyond that nobody actually looks at, and then find that, and that's going to emanate, you know. And you know, a buddy of mine the other day was like, is that like a narcissistic way of being because you're not considering other people? And I don't feel that it's that way, only because you're doing it with so much compassion and love that you're viewing that other person in all their vulnerability, and you're being wildly vulnerable with them. So how can a narcissist be vulnerable? You know,
Sure.
it's not discounting anything. It's just knowing that I got to start here first and then consider what's outside of me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I love the quote, and I say this almost like, I feel like I say it all the time. It's like, there's no such thing as one-way liberation. Like when I live in my truth, it also liberates you, even if, you know what I mean? Say we're in a relationship and my truth is that this isn't working for me.
Right.
And I'm not considering you in that. No, I'm living what's true for me, but what's liberating for me will also liberate you to be able to find what works for you, you know, somebody that can meet you in the ways that you need to be met. And we're so, I think, conditioned societally to look outside of ourselves and to focus, because our senses are pointed outward. It's saying externalize everything.
Yep.
And so we completely discount our own internal experience, or we just have learned to numb it and suppress it and not listen to it because we've been told not to trust ourselves, that we don't have the answers, that we need to, even in religion, for me, it was, you know, don't trust your heart. It's deceitful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was like the messaging I got.
Isn't that nuts?
It's crazy. I've been doing a lot of God trauma work over the last like 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So you guys at home, this is building. You've heard this a lot, not just in this conversation, but in so many of the weeks prior to this, is like, you have to go within yourself and start feeling your feelings and start contemplating and listening to what it is that your body is telling you, because your body has the answers. It is the subconscious mind. It is holding all of the stories that maybe you're not even aware of. Yep. I want to get back to this piece on abundance, because a lot of people who listen to the show, we're in a weird time. A lot of people are struggling financially. They're like, how do I want my external world to match my internal world. I just hosted a women's circle last night. 20 women got up and were like, you know, speaking into what they want to create. And so many of them were like, I'm really ready for my external world to start to match the work I've been doing internally.
Right.
And it feels like there's just something in the way. Why am I doing all of this internal work, but my external world isn't shifting? So can you speak to the process of consciously creating our reality?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So this one's fun. And a lot of this is going to be in my class thing, but so I won't give too many, but I'll go through a lot of it. The outside abundance is an illusion. That's the first thing everybody has to consider. And it sounds crazy because this feels so damn real, right? Everything around us feels real, and money feels real. We've been conditioned off of this thing called currency, how money works, the whole thing. And it's a struggle for people to detach from that, right? Yeah. So that's why the process is you have to detach from the outcome of money and all of the systems and structures in order to then understand that this whole thing is malleable. Because otherwise you're still looking at the microphone's a microphone, and okay, in order for me to get the microphone, I need to get X amount of dollars to get it. And so that's how I'm looking at it. Well, no, that's not how it's created. We've got the whole thing flipped upside down.
So you're saying, you're like, okay, I need money to buy a microphone, but in order to get money, I need to not care about money or not need money.
It's not looking at money with the same understanding. You look at money as just like an it's just energy, just like your energy. That's energy. Money's just energy. Yeah. Right. What would you say is the most valuable element or thing in the world that you receive every single day? Pick two.
Like that I receive.
That is just in your world every single day. Like, what is the most valuable thing in your world every single day? If you didn't have it, it would be just horrible.
Oh, I was going to first say like my time and energy are my most valuable things, but like a physical thing,
like that you can see and touch.
Oh,
or see and touch and feel.
My relationships.
Your relationships. Yeah. Okay. All right. What if you didn't have oxygen and light?
Yeah, I wouldn't exist.
It'd be pretty rough, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't exist.
So, but we go through life not thinking about. We feel we're so worthy to receive oxygen and light, we don't think about it.
Right.
And it keeps us alive. Right. But it just happens to be, and we're like, but we're creating it. It's the energy of that we have created, as an aspect of consciousness in this quantum realm. We're snapping it into life all the time. Like whatever sits inside of our mini supercomputer in our mind also matches the mainframe of the one. Mm-hmm. And we just receive this and we get it all the time. Mm-hmm. We get the oxygen, we get the light. Mm-hmm. You know, we actually have ground, we have gravity, so we'll fly off the earth. We have all these different like things that keep us around.
Non-physical things that we take advantage.
But the ground's kind of physical. Like I can repave the thing and do stuff with it, right? I can go out and I can harvest oxygen and I can turn on a light bulb. So I can harvest these things in order to make my days become a little bit more balanced. So at night I can read a book. I can do certain things, right? So if that's the case and money functions the same way because it's just energy, I have to start to move myself into a path of worthiness in order to actually understand I'm just as worthy to receive that as I am the oxygen I'm breathing, as I am the light that I'm witnessing. And it's a mind state shift.
Okay. So am I, in terms of, let me just like make sure I'm in grounding what you're saying. So when I wake up in the morning, in the same way I assume, I just don't even, I feel like oxygen is a guarantee.
Yeah.
It's just like, I assume it's going to show up because it's,
I know it. You know it.
If I start to use that level of belief in the energetics of abundance, it will start to show up.
It's a knowing. You know, on this day, here's what's going to happen. Like we just had a company retreat the other day. And one of the things we put a OKR up. We're like, we're going to hit these numbers. We're going to do this thing. And literally that night, like 3 things like snapped in because our container that we built as a company started to create it. Mm-hmm. And, we bring these practices that we're talking about right now into our company. And sometimes we, somebody will get lost, one of the partners will get lost, whatever it might be. And they kind of veer off in a direction. And we're like, okay, now we see why that profit center is starting to be a little bit funky because they got lost in the illusion. So let's bring it back. Mm-hmm. Let's build our container of self. Where are you? Where are you holding on to this? Where's the trauma hitting you? Let's talk about mom and dad for a second.
Wow.
And let's get into let's remove that so we can be worthy of it. And a lot of us, what we do is we say, okay, I need this money because it's going to make me feel safe because I didn't feel safe when I was younger.
Yes.
Mom and dad trauma, not a money trauma issue. It's a mom and dad trauma issue.
Yes.
Right? Which is their mom and dad trauma issue, which is their mom and dad trauma issue, which is keep going back, keep going back. And then you play whack-a-mole with like trauma. And then you end up where? You end up what, Adam and Eve?
Yeah.
Then where'd that come from? You end up at God? Well, then let's deal with the trauma of God in order to be like, okay, well, there's something there that we have labeled that God created in love for us that we call trauma that originated from the one. Okay, so how about I clear that really quickly so I could be worthy to receive whatever it might be. Therefore, I'm not looking at money this way anymore because the money, we keep using it to solve our trauma issues. So if you imagine that, it's like putting like lighter fuel on a fire and then expecting it to heal you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense. Or the fire to go out, whatever. Like it's so confusing the way that we do it. So we've got the whole system kind of upside down.
Yeah.
And that's the knowing that you have is that I no longer live in trauma. I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got to clear that slate to receive. Mm-hmm. I know what money is in my life, and it's not something that it's scarcity. It's not scarce for me. It's something that I already have, and it's not about it coming to me. It's just here, and when you know that, it's the same way as breathing. It will just start to flood itself to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right? So how do we go, because I wrote this down, and it's something you said. I heard you say it. How do we move from, maybe you just touched on this, but to ground this in a little bit more, from thinking about it to knowing it,
right, to
then trusting that you know it, right? Yeah. It's like, because we can conceptually understand that and we're thinking about it. And how do we move from the head into the heart? Because you were like, let's just clear that trauma real quick. It's like, okay, real quick. Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of people have taken years and years to like clear their trauma, but it's just snapping into an awareness. It's like, it really is like shifting your perception of, which Marianne Williamson says, is a miracle. It's a shift in perception.
It's just a perception shift. Yeah. It's there. I mean, there's many ways to get there.
Yeah.
Right. The fastest, well, I call it, there's no time or space or whatever, but yeah. But if I say the way of ease and the most harmonious way that I found to clear the trauma is by forgiving God.
Tell me more about that.
Okay. So God doesn't need our forgiveness. Okay. But we forgive it to release what our perception is and our judgment is of what God has created in our life.
Thinking it's wrong.
Yes.
Yes.
And so when we do that and we have that exercise, and it's a constant like wheel that we cycle for ourselves, because it's like, oh, well, why would this happen to me? Well, I'm going to throw in a devil camp over here, right? I'm going to put it in the Satan camp. I'm going to go over there. What happens is that you now take a version of the all, because the all created the all. You can't have a separation of that. So there's not this like separate all over here that we call evil.
Right.
It's part of all, right? But I take that and I start throwing more junk into it. What ends up happening, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I have not gone through the process of saying, you know what, I love everything that you created, God.
Yeah.
All the trauma. And you're like, well, what if somebody dies in your family, or a child gets sick, or whatever it might be? You have to see that as love. Yeah. And that's a very hard thing to do because of how we've been conditioned. But it's only our conditioning. It's not our reality.
100%. That literally was my path to spiritual awakening, is basically losing all of my family in very tragic ways. And then realizing my suffering came from the belief that it shouldn't be this way. Yeah. And that belief of thinking it shouldn't have happened. Yeah. They shouldn't have left. God shouldn't have allowed this, that I lived with. And basically is like me saying, the sun should be in that side of the sky, right? That I know the way it should be is what I was basically sitting in the energy of, like, I know best. Yeah. It shouldn't be this way, and they should be here, or that he shouldn't have broken my heart, or all the ways I think it's wrong. Right. Right. And then my awakening came from understanding that I was trying to play the role of God. Yeah. That I think I know best, and versus surrendering to what Peter Crone says is what happened. Right. And it couldn't have happened any other way. Right. Because it didn't. Right. And so I can attribute that it is that for me, it took me a while to get there, but it's like to the it's perfect piece. Right. You know, there was a big part of me that was like, this isn't perfect. This sucks. You know what I mean? Right. But eventually it was like, I'm going to assume I can tell many stories about why something happened, and I'm going to tell the story that makes me feel the best, which is that it is exactly what it was meant to be. It's the heart story. It's all okay. Yeah. All of it's okay. It's the inner child. It's the part of us that thinks it's not okay. It's not going to be okay. Yeah. That is also the one that's in scarcity, that's running and chasing money. Yeah. I'm not going to be okay. I'm not going to be okay. It's this fearful one inside that's like, I've got to make it okay. So I have to go out and get this thing, or make it the way I think it's supposed to be, so that I can soothe the part of me that is scared to death. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And one thing you said there was about, playing the role of God. Mm-hmm. We all are created in God's image, or in the source spirit's image. So there's a role we are here to play like that. We just keep playing it upside down. Mm-hmm. And we play it with a limited understanding of creation. Mm-hmm. So it's like giving a baby a gun. We have the ability. We're just like, don't know what to do with it. Firing it off in the wrong direction, right? Yeah. So with that, it's, the exercise that I go through with people is you say, okay, if God created it all from the beginning, let me go to the end and create it all from the end. Okay. How do we do that? So you put yourself as the last person in existence. Okay. And then you look back at all of creation. Mm-hmm. And then your responsibility, here's your task. Your task is to go in and say, you know what? I'm going to look at this and I'm going to give the creator, the beginning, back all the answers that it ever was looking for in all of creation. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? Does that look like I'm going to judge it all and I'm going to bring back this whole fractured thing? Or was I'm going to say, I'm going to love all of this. Wow, this was beautiful. I created my parents. I created my friends. I created all the broken relationships and all the healed ones. I created my children. I created all of these different things that are the creation of self. And now I created the wars. I created the sickness, the famine. I created all of this stuff. And me looking at that is like, all this is beautiful for me to actually understand why it all came this way, why it all came to me at this moment in time. Then you bring that back to the beginning, and then you merge those things together. So that's the all that gets split to try and experience itself. Yes. Yeah. So you just put yourself at the end, because we are the matter. That's the light. Yeah. We're the container. We're to receive.
And the thing of it is that if a container is here to receive the light, we are feminine energy that's here to receive that in different versions and forms that we have masculine and feminine inside of us. We're supposed to do things to give back, and it's all of that. But we're supposed to take all this and we're supposed to bring it in and channel it in. And then we're supposed to do something with it and integrate it back out. Right. And so there's a balance between it. All of us avatars have different roles to be able to do things with it. But we need to receive that light, and that material form that we are is here to receive it. So therefore we can actually give something back from a different version of it, to resequence it, to become the alchemist of that light, into saying this is how it can actually show up beautifully in physical form over and over and over and over and over again.
Because when you start to, even for those who are listening, I'm like, this is, for me to think everything's perfect in my life, it's like, there's a lot that's I see as or perceive as wrong or bad or whatever. You need to pretend to try that on. Is going to show me all the places where I'm in resistance to that.
Yeah.
And all the places I'm in resistance to that is where I'm in resistance to what is, to reality. Right. And that was my kind of coming to terms with it. It's like, I'm in a war with myself, with life. I'm at war with life. How do I expect to be at peace within myself when I'm at war in my mind? I was and being in resistance to what is all the time versus being in acceptance and embracing what is. How does that correlate to, or does it have any correlation to worthiness? How do we start to unlock that lock with the key of worthiness, of like understanding that it is our birthright to have and to be in abundance in all areas of our life, not just in some? Because it's like, what does it mean to be rich if you're only rich in one area?
Yeah.
Or, what I mean?
And not rich in all areas. Yeah. So the one thing you said in there, it was about it all being perfect, and people struggle with that.
Yeah. Accepting what is.
And what I want to say is, the only reason you don't accept it, there's only one reason you don't accept it as perfect, because you have conditioning that has taught you to feel safe, or the perception of safety relies in your conditioning, right? So what conditioned you? Well, this illusion conditioned you. And so if the illusion conditioned me, and this is an aspect of my creation, what taught me that things about this illusion? Because you were talking about, you got to feel your feelings. We label the feeling of our feelings based on our conditioning. So therefore we don't feel it, right? We put a label to it and we're like, oh, that feels like this, but that was only because we watched a movie or were taught something or whatever it might be, that means this.
Yes. We've applied meaning.
Yeah. We've put some meaning to it, and it is full of meaning, and there's things about it, but it's not our own limited perception. Like we've only got, the max person's got like 100 years maybe of perspective on witnessing that. And it's all still conditioned from all of the timelines that have kind of like rolled down, right? So for it to be perfect, we have to understand that I have to let go of the conditioning. So that's like step number one, let go of the conditioning. So you want to be in abundance, let go of the conditioning. Then when you let go of the conditioning, what you do is you take all the ice cubes out of your cup, okay, that have been the little blockers there, because they're not melting, because you keep wanting to make it cold for some reason through the conditioning. The cold makes it condition. And you just pour them out. Right. And they'll come back in again, because somebody's going to drop them in, your cousin, your mom, your sister, your brother, whatever, your dad is going to drop an ice cube in there, and you're going to have to make the decision. Okay, this isn't mine. This isn't mine. I have to keep pouring the cup out. That's the work, right? So you have to do some work to tip the cup over, but it's as easy as tipping the cup over and recognizing it's not yours. That's detachment and acceptance. I accept that you put it in my cup. I'm not going to hold on to this, and I'm going to let it go. Right? Just do that exercise in your mind whenever something comes in. And then at which point you say, okay, now what do I fill it up with? Okay. Well, all the time, the divine is constantly pouring stuff in, and your cup has a very specific capacity, and it's only going to get as full as you allow it to be open. Okay. Yeah. So if I have all these ice cubes in my cup, it gets full really fast. And so therefore, how much abundance do I have? As I have as much as the space in between the ice cubes.
Yes.
Not all that I could possibly have.
So the more we empty ourselves of our conditioning.
Yes.
Via some of these tools and practices that we, through meditation, conscious awareness, rewriting our belief system, all the things, right? Because it's like we're also working against a brain that is conditioned.
Yes.
It's not just like, okay, yes, I have this conditioning, these ice cubes, I need to pour them out. It's like also the brain is wired for that conditioning.
It's wired, but it's also wired to pour it out. It's wired on both sides. It's just a tool, right? It's just a tool. So it's just, I always call it, when somebody goes on this walk, it's like a baby walking. You got so good at walking by holding the ice cubes and grabbing more and more and more. And now your cup is literally frozen at the top.
Yeah.
Because you keep putting that chill on it. And this is your exercise you've been doing for however old you are, right? Now it's like, okay, I'm actually starting to thaw that. My awakening is thawing it. Now there are actually ice cubes in here and I see how it works. Now all I got to do, just like the baby walking, who's going to stumble and fall and bust his head and trip and crawl and do all the things. Eventually it starts walking, and then they don't think about walking. You don't think about walking like you did when you were like a child, right? You don't think about, how am I going to eat this food?
No.
How am I going to cut this steak up?
It's automatic.
It's just, you just do. Okay. And so when you just do, then it's the same thing. When it comes in, cup out. When it comes in, cup out. You just keep doing it, and you get better and better and better and better. And it just becomes a rhythmic cycle. Then you have this really big, full cup that the divine is always pouring into. It's just up to you to get it out
to
the way.
receive it.
Yeah.
So what is the correlation? Have I heard you talk about something with your left hand, left hand and receiving, and how that's correlated to the feminine?
Yes.
Because a lot of people have a lot of struggle receiving.
Yes.
Like, it's a big thing. There's like, we're taught to do, to give, to be of service, to produce. But then when it comes to us receiving love or affirmations or affection or goodness or whatever, somebody gives you compliment. Oh, no.
You push it back immediately. Yeah. No. So the deal with, so in the Kabbalah, there's masculine and feminine sides of the tree of life. Okay. The right side, or the masculine side, is the giving side. The left side is the receiving side. Okay. And most of us, what we do is because we've been taught for the last 2,000 years through the age of Pisces and all of this patriarchal, misogynistic way of being, is that I'm supposed to force my agenda and I'm supposed to take. We think receiving is taking.
Yes.
So in our mind and our conditioning, think about that being programmed.
You're putting together something for me.
Yeah.
Please continue.
So this is receiving, it's taking, and there's force applied to it. So when I get a compliment, I didn't take that, right? That doesn't feel like the last 2,000 years.
Right.
So why would I do it that way? And then when I give something, I should give with expectation. So I'm going to force it on you, and you need to give me something back. That's the taking. There's no balance in that, right? So where we are now is like, okay, I just sit with an open hand. And there's a quote, my aunt, who she passed away actually like a few days after after I was born. She said, hold life like a butterfly with an open hand, not a clenched fist. And that was on her tombstone. It was one of the first things I ever read when I was a kid. And, I was like, what does that mean? I didn't get it. But when you get it, it just comes and goes. And so if you hold the receiving and the giving with an open hand, and your giving hand always has to have something in it, and your receiving hand always has to be empty. And what we do is we put what we have from an abundance perspective in our receiving hand, because this looks like this. So I want to actually hold on to money. I want to hold on to relationships. I want to hold on to whatever it is. And I never actually give it away. So that's the stewardship of being able to be a teacher or a guide and be able to put that information out there. It's also getting it out of this hand as it comes in, and you basically give it away.
Yeah.
So you constantly have to be giving what you're receiving and not hoarding it and holding on to it.
Yeah. And we close the fist the moment when we're in scarcity.
Yeah.
And we hold on to it. There's a story about the monkey in the cage that sort of depicts the same kind of visual, but it kind of talks to our level of suffering. So basically a monkey's in a cage and there's some nuts outside the cage, and he puts his fist or his wrist through the cage and grabs the nuts. Yeah. And as soon as he closes his fist, he can't get his fist back into the cage.
100%.
So it's about having the open palm. It's like you're restricted. The moment that you close that fist and hold on to it, you are constrained.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because all of life is code. Every experience you have, so for me, growing up, I had, I did this neurotraining. I had this massive mother wound right, associated with my mom, because she was adopted. I saw what she went through with my father. My father was like just a rolling stone, right? So watching all that stuff happen, and then growing up and thinking, okay, well, what is it like to be a man? And I had this like patriarchal, manipulative way of being that was hurting so many people in my life. And even, when I met my now wife, who moved me into this whole space of like spirituality, because she was like, well, maybe meditate, try something different. And I was like, I'm from Texas, right? I'm like, well, let me do the whole, I'm going to just go to church and do that.
Sure.
And once that opened up, it was like, oh, this is how you actually honor feminine energy differently. But I still didn't get it. I mean, I'd say probably I'm a good 2 years into kind of really getting it and walking in that and being able to embrace it. But that code of even the exercise of a relationship, for a lot of people, when I work with a lot of men and they're like, why am I not making money? Well, tell me how your relationship is with your wife, your partner, your mother, your girlfriend. Oh, it's not great. I'm hurting them. I'm looking at other women. I'm in an affair. I'm whatever. Well, that's why. Let's talk about it, because you can't even find the ability to honor the receivership outside of you in this person who's this divine feminine in your life that's only there to help you and love you. And she sees you as something, and she's putting up with your shit, right? So at some point you need to actually go within and find that within you so that you can stop creating that cyclical trauma. Yeah. And then at which point you've started to move the ice cubes out, because you can't just be passive with it. Yeah. Because that was another thing that happened to me when I started to do the work. I'm like, oh, there's no time. Fuck it. I'll let all this go. And then I'm just doing the spiritual bypassing stuff. Right. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, I don't have to think about that. And I just get I'm in the present moment. So everything's fine right now. But it's also being able to take all of time and bring it together. It's being able to take all experience, being able to take the suffering, the hurt, who you've hurt, and go through the process of reconciling that. Yeah. You don't have to go visit them and say anything. Just do it energetically. So you're sending them that vibe and that love back so that it heals.
Well, Ram Dass says the work you must do is in the privacy of your own heart.
100%. Yeah.
And that is the work. It can be externalized at times. You have, conversations with people and you clear things at times, but really it's like, it's you going in and doing that excavation of the things that, are there and that have been there maybe for generations and generations and generations that have been passed down. Is there anything else because you said everything is code, to this abundance code that we need to know?
Oh, there's so much.
Yeah. I know. Maybe the next thing is to sign up for your class so we can get all the codes.
It's a free course, right? So, jump in. But it's the way I'll just kind of give a framework of how I broke the codes up. So there's the 9 dimensions, right? And then there's 7 principles. Okay. And so the 7 principles are this philosopher's stone, the hermetics, and there's the 7 hermetic principles. Do you know what these are?
I don't know them.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I've heard them. I don't know them by heart.
Okay. Yeah. So it's the codes everywhere. We got 7 days of the week. Yep. We got 7 chakras of the body, right? We got 7 continents. We got 7 colors of the rainbow. We got 7 oceans.
God's trying to speak to us.
Like, I don't know how much more in your material world I can put to you that you need to understand 7's like something real. Yes. And once you understand that 7 is real, and there's a code to that 7, and also 9 is very real. All of them are very real, but some of this unlocks.
There's information embedded within the number itself.
Right. Yeah. And so then it's like, okay, what does it mean? Well, then there's these 7 laws of creation. Yes. Right. And even like the pyramids and the structure of it, and the whole thing like has very specific like frequency to it of why they built it that way, to give us signs to pay attention to. Right. So with that, like the 7 hermetic principles, I'll walk them real quick. The universe is mental, right? In the mind of the all. Thoughts become things. That's all it means. Everything is correspondence. Like, so as above, so below. That's number 2. Number 3, right? Everything has a rhythm. Everything has vibration. Everything's energy, right? Right. These are the laws of isness. This is the triangle. Okay. So the circle is God. The mini circle is mini God, you, the God inside of you. Okay. Okay. These principles are the isness that hold the circle, right, to where it can kind of do its thing off of the isness of the universe. So those first 3 laws are like, they're just irrefutable. They just are. Everything's vibration. We've proven that out in science. Yeah. Thoughts become things. You think something, it happens at some point in your life, right? As above, so below. If you start studying the quantum scale and quarks and fermions and bosons and all the like subatomic particles.
Or look at a tree.
Look at the same thing as the universe and a tree and everything else. Like, it's all the same thing, interconnectedness. It's a Russian doll effect. So then you have this square, right, inside of it. And in that square, I don't know, users can't see it, anybody at home, but the square is what's balance, right? So the balancing one is that everything has rhythm.
Got it.
The pendulum swings to the left, swings to the right. You have a good day, you have a bad day. It always comes, right?
It's the
right.
Yeah, there's a rhythm, a seasons and cycles. Yeah.
There's a way to rise above that. I always say, go back to your childhood self. What was one of the most fun things you like to do? You jump rope. You don't just let the rope hit you in the legs. You just jump over it. There's a rhythm to that rope. It comes and it goes. That's just the rhythm of life. Every time it starts coming around, be aware, jump over the rhythm that's coming to kick your ass every time, and then you no longer receive it, right? But it's still there, and you just become a person that's hopping over.
You get into the flow with the rhythm.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
The next thing, everything has polarity. There's like duality and polarity to our existence in this material realm that we have to bring back into balance. This is why we put up prayer hands, is because we want to bring it into balance. You bring it together. The fourth one is everything has karma, cause and effect, right? Like it's everything has a cause, everything has an effect. Like the cause creates the effect. And the last one, everything has a gender. There's a masculine and feminine to everything. So any of that's out of balance, this little mini circle that's inside collapses. So then if this is out of balance, your polarity, all of a sudden, what does your circle look like? It doesn't look like a circle. So can you actually receive what God's giving you? Not at all. So those are 7 codes inside of it.
Yeah.
So you take those 7 codes and you go through each dimension, right? With each 7 code infinitely deep, right? Now that's a process, but we go surface level deep, but that's all you need in order to unlock each one of those 9 dimensions that gets you to your full self.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So clearly we need a master class on going deep into the sound, because this is infinite. I mean, there are layers and layers and layers to this. And you think you've done the subconscious reprogramming and the meditations and the hypnosis and all the inner child work. But it's like, these are the codes. If you can really start to understand, you will completely shift your reality.
And so it's 9 times 7 is 63 plus the code is 0. Okay. So the code is 0, there's 64 codes.
Okay.
And so once you understand the 64 codes, which is there's 64 gene keys, all this stuff kind of like you see, inside of the Kabbalah, there's 32 paths of wisdom. Once you understand those, you start unlocking things. Like then 64, half of 64 is 32.
Okay.
When you take the tree of life, it's actually 32 pieces of that. You put that together, it's 64. The flower of life has 64 spheres inside of it. Like the whole thing is bananas.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in my Jesus year, my Buddha year, 33.
Yeah.
What's the significance of that?
So everything has a +1 principle. It has the 0. You add the 0 to the actual whole, and then it becomes the 33. So 32 plus the 1 is the 33. Yeah. And that's part of the journey. And then what happened with Christ is that Christ and Mary Magdalene were back to back. They both had the 32. They pulled it together to create the 64. Yeah.
Y'all. There's so much here. I could talk to you all day. This is fascinating. And I think, if anything, like, what is the big takeaway you want people to hear from all of this? Like all of the wisdom, all of the knowledge you've accumulated over your years of studying. Yeah. Like, what, if you could sum it up into like a takeaway that you want people to understand about themselves and the nature of who they are? Yeah. What would that be?
I mean, I'd say the takeaway at this point is that we are at the point to where we can collectively ascend, and you can start the process of your upgrade now. Okay. When we choose to do this, because they've proven scientifically, like, time isn't really even a thing. Everything starts to come together. Okay. When we hold on to the past and trauma, it no longer is love. Okay. So we got to let it go and then turn our past and our trauma and everything that's haunted us into love. This is when the whole devil and everything goes away. At that point, then what happens is we no longer see the future as dark and dank or whatever it might be, because if I would see the past, it becomes light. What then happens is both sides of these devils that we've created in polarity, because you take too much of anything, it becomes the devil, right? It comes together and it honors you and it starts to serve you. Yeah. Then at which point we start to go through the process of collectively ascending, and then we will turn into something totally different. I have a notion that all of these aliens that come and visit us are just us in other frequency forms coming to witness us from a different perspective. Yeah. It's just us. Yeah. Being like, hey, pay attention. You're getting there. Come on.
Trying to, whisper to you.
Yeah. And when that happens, we heal this world. We move through galaxies. We heal so many things. We no longer get sick. We are walking with the divine. And I know that feels far if you feel like you can't put 2 pennies together right now. Yeah. But you will put 2 pennies together when you know who you are and you stand in the worthiness of how you can actually receive and just tip your cup out every time the ice goes back in it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, the reality is, it's like, what other option do we have?
Right.
it's an oblique.
Yeah.
It's a bleak future, like you said, because what we're doing is we're projecting our past experience onto the future, and we're going to recreate the past, which we think is so horrible, right? And it's like, that's not a world you want to live in. That doesn't, make anything what's worth living for. You know what I mean? So we have to make peace with the past.
Yes.
In order to create a future that's worth wanting to be in. But as we do that, we project the love that we have come to terms with in our past and project that into the future and see what happens.
Yeah, the awakening when it happens is going to be in an instant. And it will be such a massive upgrade. And we're giving ourselves all the tools right now to get there.
Do you feel like we are progressing?
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, one of two options is going to happen. Okay. One is going to be 8 billion people figure this out. The other is that we're going to eradicate many
Destroy
of us.
Ourselves.
And there'll be a set of us that figure it out. Either way, we figure it out. Right. And so, whatever that is, we're going to get there. I'd like to get there all together. I think it'll be a really nice party, right?
I do too.
To have fun with 8 billion people versus maybe 800,000 is a different vibe.
Well, this is the importance of conversations like this, to let people hear this message so they understand the importance of the time is now.
Time is now.
Time is now.
Yeah.
It's not, and even though there's no such thing as time.
and I want to, just before we go, I want to reframe that.
For sure.
Time is a coordinate on a map of our creation. Okay. So there's space and there's time. It's like, there was this space with this person in 1958. That was this whole deal. That is a time coordinate. Time on a linear path of us saying, okay, all of this is a reality and I need to use this to get somewhere. That's the illusion. Okay. These things happen, right? And there's coordinates of those. And it's about how we place our intention and look at them from that perspective, because that was a now time. This is a now time. Tomorrow's a now time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And there's all these happening as we're witnessing them all over the place as 8 billion people on this earth. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the time thing. But as we want to change our lives and as we want to do something, all of that happens in an instant.
Yeah.
They've even proven that. They've proven that the speed of light is like there's something faster than the speed of light, 20 times faster. That the time that it takes for the light to get from the earth to here is much faster. There was a study, I think in 1997, Robert Gisson went out and he did this whole thing where he was studying like how fast light travels and these things travel and photons travel, and it's like 20 times faster.
Yeah.
And so all this stuff happens like this. So therefore there is no real time.
Right.
From that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the moment that
Just the moment.
Become aware.
Yeah. Over and over and over and over and over.
Over and over and over.
Yeah.
It's the new now. It's
right.
the new now. It's the new now
right.
all the time.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing your medicine, your wisdom to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Shining the light and being, the voice that so many people need to connect some dots. So they're, some of those puzzle pieces they're trying to put together.
It's a little bit of the story.
Yeah.
I know it will help people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where can people find you online and get connected to your work and just understand more about, what you're doing and what you're sharing online? Yeah.
So main platform is Instagram, Abundance 10,000. So it's 10,001 and then the zeros afterward. I have in my bio, I have a link for the masterclass. It's free. It's on the 18th.
I'm going to be in it.
Yeah. So if this comes out before then great. If not, the link will be there. You get the replay of it.
Cool.
And there'll be more to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you're doing amazing work. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for being here. I hope you guys took notes. You're going to want to watch this back. I know it. Share this with somebody that you love who's on their ascension and awakening journey. It might put some puzzle pieces together for them. And if you loved the show, take a screenshot, tag us, let us know that you watched it, or leave a rating and review. That's the best way you can say thank you. Appreciate you. And we'll see you next week on the Coachable Podcast. See ya.